Thank you for coming for this Salon, one of the Salon sessions during the Art Basel Hong Kong 2013. We are here now accompanied by Matthias Arndt from Arndt Gallery Berlin on the other end of the seats. Next to him is Entang Wiharso, artist based in Yogyakarta from Indonesia, and Arin Dwihartanto Sunaryo also from Bandung, Indonesia. And they asked me to moderate the sessions. Hopefully I can do my job well. I'm Enin Supriyanto, working as independent curator, writer based in Jakarta and Yogyakarta, Indonesia. So we will quickly get some sort of like informations, opinions from Matthias first, I guess, because this session supposed to be closely related to the fact that Matthias just organized a show, Arndt Gallery in Berlin just organized a show of Indonesian contemporary art in Berlin, and at the same time launch a new publications published by Distance Verlag, publishing house based in Berlin, distributed widely internationally. Now I think already available. You can get it. I should show the book here. It's called SIP Indonesian Art Today. With inside you can read artist profile, 16 Indonesian artist profile with samples of the works of their works. But before we it seems to be like the book and the show organized by Arndt seems to be a very important kind of stage, especially in Europe. And now we are talking about this shift of attention globally towards Southeast Asia, in particular Indonesia at the same time. Because especially in the case with Arndt, you already well known, established in Europe, in Berlin. And in the last 4 or 5 years, you shift your attention towards Southeast Asia, particularly Indonesia. So you have organized Asia Looking South, 2011 in Berlin. And then you also organized 2 Indonesian artist solo shows also in Berlin, Entang Wiharso and then Eko Nugroho, I guess. And then other than that, you also organize group shows presenting Indonesian artists as well in Sydney and Melbourne. And just earlier this year, you established your other space in Singapore at Gilman Barrack. So it seems like you quickly move to that part of to this part of the world. So probably it will be good just to hear more from you, Matthias.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you also for having us and having me here. Let's say to shift and to look at international art was always the profile of my work. I mean, that only as one starting point. 20 years ago, when we opened in Berlin, there was not that kind of Berlin art consisting of many great international artists. And so my curiosity was always there, and we built a program but mostly with Western art. And when I then, more or less by accident, 2009, 2010, went to Indonesia, went to Singapore, saw the first work from that region, mainly at that time Indonesian art. The art did the work on me. I was so impressed, I was overwhelmed. From my observations with the Western art, we reached a point where art became, not all of it, but most, in the wider sense, more formal, lesser engaged in a way with the social and the cultural environment and the issues in our world, Western, Asian, international. And I was just stunned, overwhelmed, as I said, and impressed by the works by Entang Wiharso and Agus Suwage, FX Hasono, the first shows that we did, the group shows that we did, by how the artists kind of address the issues in their country and formulate them in an international, universal language, and thought this shall be seen. That's my work was always to bring into a new audience work that shall be seen and that shall be discussed. And that's what I then did in Berlin with, to the astonishment of the audience there also, who first reactions were like kind of, you see some images from the solo shows and group shows that we did and from the works that are now in the show in Berlin. So 3 years ago, first show, kind of the reaction was, what is that folklorist engagement here? What is, I mean, and I spare the very negative words. People were surprised. They were really almost threatened and provoked. But from that provocation, they started a discourse and an interaction. And that led, in the Indonesian case, to the assumption that if I want to do this, this cannot be a gallery project, that has to be a more curatorial project. We invited Curator and worked with the Indonesian Visual Arts Archive together on the artist profile. We wanted to do one publication that is not a commercial publication, that is done with Distanz Verlag, that is internationally distributed, and that shall create kind of a base and a foundation on which we can better contextualize and discuss what we were showing. Basically, we were trying to do a fragment of the work that Dr. Uy and others present here in the audience are doing for decades in Indonesia and in Southeast Asia. So that was the starting point.
Thank you, Matthias. Now we have a very limited time, like half an hour, and then later on I have to give another 10-15 minutes to the audience to us. So we'd better quickly move to these two artists. As happens nowadays, that a lot of galleries, European galleries, actually visiting Indonesia is more and more frequent these days in the last 2 and 3 years. It seems like the attention is not only coming from the commercial side of the art scenes. It's also it's also coming from much more established institutions. We can, for instance, mention one case where Guggenheim in New York already organized the show presenting Southeast and South Asian works in Guggenheim. The show is still on, I think, now, curated by colleagues of mine, Jun Yap from Singapore, the curator. The show called No Countries, contemporary art from South and Southeast Asia. And one of the Indonesian artists presented there is Arin, Dwihartanto Sunaryo. So I would like to ask Arin, do you really recognize this coming attentions more and more from the international or global kind of art scene?
Well, I kind of overwhelmed at first, but the last couple of years since I came back from London, the demand, the art scene in Indonesia is already already appear. Because I left Indonesia for study in London in 2003. So it's still, the art scene is so quiet compared to what happened today. So the booming was in 2006, and I missed it. And I came back, there was a recession, so I missed the party. But still, for me, comparing back then, it was quite active compared to what happened in London too. And then during that time, one by one, galleries, local and international galleries came. So I'm getting aware about the situation, and now, yeah.
You're busy.
Yeah, kind of. But it's really exciting moment. So This
And
time I don't want to miss it.
so especially after the show, a lot of people said that they are quite shocked that you are among among so many Indonesian artists. There are only two young artists pick up for or included in the
Yeah.
show in Guggenheim.
Yeah, for me
You
as
and
well. Yeah.
Reza
I
Avicenna.
asked the curator why you choose me, why you choose Asung, but she always has this answer that our theme suit to her her whole
Curatorial.
curatorial,
Okay.
yeah.
Ah,
So that's the only answer I get. So
whatever that means.
yeah.
But after the show in Guggenheim, you have like increased invitations by galleries, international galleries, probably doing shows for your next project, upcoming project.
Yeah, you could say that.
Okay. Is it giving more pressure for you as an artist, or?
No, I think I'm still enjoying the moment. So all the pressures, I just let them in, and because I'm not kind of person who works just work every day, because usually I'm very lazy person. I only work for if there's an exhibition. So with this moment, I can work every day.
Okay, we'll move quickly to Entang. This is another kind of international attentions that happened, which focused to Indonesian art. Of course, the initiative also come from the Indonesian side, but it takes two to tango. So the Venice Biennale organization actually approached Indonesia to participate again in Venice Biennale in sort of like spatial pavilion, country pavilion. So for the next this upcoming soon to be open Venice Biennale, there will be Indonesian pavilion, and this will be the second time actually Entang Wiharso participated in Venice Biennale representing Indonesia, right, Entang?
Yeah, yeah.
So you experienced the sad story during 2005 of Indonesian participation in Venice. Do you think that this year it will be much better?
Yes, I believe so. You know, uh, I remember in 2005, and I was invited. I'm so excited, and then I didn't know about Venice at that time, and then I went there, and then there's I thought it's in one building, with big building, but separate building, and then I think at that time the organization is quite premature, yeah. But I think but they're trying so hard, because what's happened, in Indonesia there's no like a government support at that time. Now the government is support for Venice Biennale, and they take ownership. So I'm so happy about that. I mean, they still can do more, but I think if we ask government do more, maybe too much. I think because they have a big job, and I believe every Indonesian can create something like Dr. Oi and Epe Karsono, as an artist also doing projects, even though the institution or the museum or the government didn't make a platform or venue, the artist or the art scene still can grow and can do something, because the art, I believe, creating art is to connect, to communicate, and to break the border, any kind of border. So I think, and I don't want to speak too much. And I think this moment, and I'm so excited because, now I'm inviting again, and what that mean, and mean is a big responsibility in my shoulder, but I take ownership and I take everything chance possibility and uh, and because they give me a lot of chance, so I think that's wonderful. And I, you know, so in this moment, so I'm used, I can say, to presenting the best uh, work for this venue. Yeah.
Okay, back to you, Matthias. You know these two artists works quite well, and we are talking about this image of Indonesia uh, represented by their works. But if you took these two artists as an example, their artistic approach is way different, almost extremely different. Arin's work is taking painting into a different conceptual level. It's very much dealing with paint as material rather than, it's not even color as substance. It's really the materiality of the paint being explored in his works. While Entang very much rooted into Indonesian social cultural sort of like tradition. So visually they are way different. Even conceptually they are doing, and this is happening at the same time. What do you think about these issues when you have, let's say, group shows or trying to explain this artist works for your audience, for your client base in Berlin, for instance?
Good point. As a good point. But before that, maybe I was never a friend too much of this national branding of. Is that still working here? I was never such a friend of this international branding, so I was not sure whether I should do a show of Indonesian art, whether I should do really a survey of that kind. But exactly what you mentioned, when you, it needed to be done once again and systematically, because it just, the attempt of this project is to show the depth formally, artistically, conceptually of the art, because of the various artists that are working there, as you just named it all, the cultural enrootement and the formal, more Javanese figures and forms, and then what you could call it a Western approach to painting in a formal way, in a conceptual way, but then working with the material from the side, from your country, the dust of Merapi volcano and other things. So there's many references within the country, but always this, as I call, universal language, and that I wanted to make that clear. And the audience now, not only in Berlin, because Berlin is only a platform and a turntable itself as well. We have a huge artistic platform, but the market and the professional audience is worldwide. It goes through Berlin. So the reactions are exactly as we hoped. People see the diversity, the profoundness of Indonesian art, and therefore we did this once, and will then end the promotion of Indonesian art. We will promote Entang Wiharso as an international artist based in Indonesia. We will hopefully one day do a project with Arin, Dwihartanto and other artists, and continue this work and showing the artists as what they are, international, professional artists that need to be and can compete and quality-wise and conceptually with the international context, and put that further.
So for artists,
and
for
just
instance,
one thing, not to be too proud now, but to mention that, as I was a bit critical, the first reactions 3 years ago in Berlin, in Europe, were more like kind of very distant. People really struggled with these forms and shapes and languages that they weren't used to. And yesterday, at the fair here, the Albrecht collection from Berlin, like epicenter of Berlin, like has a private museum foundation there, purchased a major work of Entang Wiharso's, for instance, and will put it on permanent display to Berlin. So that's a wonderful journey from Jakarta to Hong Kong, Yogyakarta to Hong Kong, and from Hong Kong to Berlin, where we already exhibited the work 2 years ago, but it was a little too early and it took time to mature, and that's what we're looking forward to really create and widen the horizon and audience.
So for artists, for instance, Indonesian artists always having this sort of like also too extreme way of the international audience way of looking at Indonesian artworks. So probably Arin experience, not all, most likely, but some probably will say your works has nothing to do with Indonesian culture or social life, social political life. While on the other hand, negatively, another kind of comment can happen to Entang. For instance, some international critics can say your work is very too much. It's very exotic. It's has a very distinctive exotic, whatever, Indonesian tropical flavor, whatever.
Yeah,
So,
that's
so
about it. Yeah, that's exactly.
what do you think about this kind of issues, Arin? But you are still
Well, but-
representing Indonesian artists at the Guggenheim.
But if you look closely to my work, there's the material that I use is very, very exotic because I use Merapi volcanic ash, so it has a very specific narrative about local culture, about the event, about the people, about the national identity. So
it's still there.
Yeah,
but
it's still
it's
there.
Just don't
but
expect
the
that you are
language
using.
probably, the language probably represent my generation, I guess. That's probably the difference between me and the other generation.
Yeah. Entang?
Well, for me, I don't care about the perception. Basically, I want to break the boundaries. Now, if you see my work now, I'm building the wall, building the fence, experiencing those conditions, living in America, and what that means living in America, and my living in Indonesia, and also always about the boundaries, about any kind of boundaries. Long time ago, we remember about the Berlin walls. We remember China Great Wall, and now like Palestine and Israel still have wall. And in the art, the wall still stick maybe, but I think in the end we need borderless, because what's happened, for me, only art we can communicate equally, because art, I believe art is only have one language, is art itself. Indonesian, American, European, Singaporean, it's just the same basically. And the artist is trying to communicate any kind of possibility, using political message, using humanity, using technology. And I think I'm so scared now. I think we are now building another wall. I think not physical wall, but the wall getting thicker. Is technology. So I think for me, art now is we need more art to break that boundary, any kind of boundaries. Yeah. So I don't believe again about any kind like, you exotic, it's about the language. You can use any kind of language to communicate. No, I think it's not, for me, bullshit about Western, about Eastern, as long you can touch as a human being, to communicate. I think that's my concern.
Okay. Yes, Matthias, you would like to add
You
something?
mentioned before, Enin, also like this, the big difference between the Indonesian and Southeast Asian, like we spoke about that one evening, like I haven't been to Vietnam yet, but like we spoke here with colleagues and Quinn Gallery from Vietnam, and she said like we have to bring the entire infrastructure. You have to bring all material, the mats for frames and everything. So you mentioned this big difference, which is important for the people in the audience who haven't experienced that yet. So whereas we have in Europe, in Germany, in America less, but we have really state engagement in art. We have institutions, we have artists, art historians, art science, we have archives, libraries, everything. All these kind of governmental state, and therefore in our place independent institutions do not exist. So Indonesia and Southeast Asia is all based on private initiative. Therefore collectors, curators, and also the market, and before all the artists themselves create initiatives, artist spaces, artist run spaces. I found that very exciting, stimulating. Experienced the parallel to Berlin, because although we had state museums 20 years ago, they were so busy sorting out their inheritance, all these major objects collected over 2,000 years and so on. They didn't look at contemporary art, so we were all at our own. But in this situation, the interesting part for Indonesia is there is an Indonesian label now that had not been created by a state. The France tried for decades to promote made in France, like the French art and so on. It didn't work because it's the individuals that needed to be promoted. So you are kind of getting caught in this Indonesian wave in a way, and try to, with a lot of success, to now differentiate and position yourself. And that is an interesting parallel. And again, and then I stop, but also because it's about the art market, interesting, whereas we started to sell our work from Berlin, Thomas Hirschhorn, Sophie Keil, Netko Solakov, the artists that we showed there, we could only find international clients. The Germans or Berliners weren't even interested at the time. And in Indonesia, we are in competition with the Indonesian collectors, because we have to encourage the artists, give it to us, we bring it outside so that it's seen outside, and they said no, we want it here. It's an amazing, it's a beautiful situation that an artist doesn't have to move theoretically because he has his home ground, but it's also tricky. And here are two artists that do work outside.
Why is it tricky for you as a gallerist?
It's addition.
You find it quite unique. I mean, like the situation in Indonesia, with the fact that Indonesian artists in the last 2-3 decades, there's always been a quite strong local market for Indonesian art.
Yeah, I find this. I'm not that I envy them, for it's really it's a strong position. It's good, but no, we have to double. We have to, while we build the international, or not me alone, but our colleagues and us try to create an international awareness and the market, we have to motivate the artists also to entrust us work that they can sell for sure in their own country, and see in these collections that they know and are trusting with. So we have a double motivation. We have to motivate the audience and have to motivate the artists to give us the work, and it works sometimes and sometimes not. Some artists decide it's too much work to go outside of Indonesia, and so much traveling, we have everything here. So anyway, so we have to work in both directions.
Okay, now I think we should move quickly to audience participations. Is there any questions from the audience? Yes, please. Any microphone?
Just stay seated, please. Hi. Thanks. This is very interesting. One thing that strikes me, though, is this is an international perspective on the Indonesian scene. I'm quite interested to know what the local experience is like, and particularly in terms of the structures. The importance of schools, whether they develop certain kind of schools of thought or approaches, whether there's artist-run initiatives, whether it's, we might say a 3-tier artist-run initiative, commercial gallery, and then institutional structure. So maybe Arin and Entang can explain this a little further, but also Matthias, I'm interested to know where you start in terms of approaching a scene like this. What's your beginning point in terms of getting the knowledge from quite a foreign structure of art practice?
Arin, you would like to?
Well, I grew up in the kind of family that really related to art. My father is an artist, my mother is a makeup artist for traditional wedding, and my brother is graphic designer, and My sister is textile designer. My uncle is architect, so it's kind of family business, I guess.
You were trapped.
And then I went to art school. That is one of the important art school in Indonesia, in ITB. And then after that, I did my master to London, and then, so what was the question again regarding?
The infrastructure, like with
Well,
is there any sort of like hierarchy of structure regarding?
Basically, I just do it by myself. I don't know. I'm not depending on what the government will give to us in terms of funding or stuff like that, because it's impossible. So.
Chemity and so on.
Oh,
Commercial galleries, are they quite important to the development of the Indonesian scene, or are the artist-run
Oh yeah,
initiatives quite
it's
important?
very important.
Yes.
Very important,
Yes,
because
like-
there's no support from the government, so the commercial galleries and, well, I hate to say, but auction also probably help the infrastructure of
Auctions,
Indonesian art.
secondary market.
Yeah.
yeah.
Really,
It's a
so even
complete
at
inversion,
a young
yeah.
stage.
I hate to say that, but that's what it is.
If I may, as you were just asking, just an experience, this is true. Whereas, and now it's very careful. It's difficult to say this, but I'll always be frank. Like, whereas in the Western part, the primary market and the secondary market are not always friends. Auction houses take advantage of the preparational work of the primary dealers, and comparing vice versa. You know the whole story. You were asking how we approached, or how I approached Indonesia, how I got there. So I got introduced to an expert, an advisor. I met artists, and it's a very it's strong community sense there. So the artists show you around. Like I met Enin early, so he introduced me to an artist. Entang said you should also look at this and that. So it's the more community based. But then also I went on tour with Amalia Vigiono from, and now I have to confuse Christie's, right? With Christie's before, and Amalia was taking 3 days to take me around also and bring me to studios. We went together to Arin's studio, and she had nothing to sell there. I mean, she was really promoting. She did what a gallerist colleague of mine should have done, or what normally, let's say, other educational institutions would do. They print the books, they do the research, they do the CVs of the artists, the archives, and so on. So it was very interesting to me. I always thought, so am I now obliged to do anything? So no, it's really sharing. They did basically part of education of me, foreign visitor, and also education, if I'm told correctly, within the market. So that was a very interesting experience. As well as the market there, not dictates, but is in a country that has no arts institutes, no official institutions, it's the market value also until a certain part, despite private foundations like the quality of the OHD Museum or others that do publications and so on, and a number of other artist-run initiatives, Chemity Art House and others. It's the market value that evaluates the artist. This is more important because it's more expensive, something that we would never dare to say, but it's the only way to start it. But that is now changing and improving, it's the fact.
Just to add up quickly to that question, there are two most influential art schools in Indonesia, already established very early after we gained our independence in 1945, after Second World War. One is in Bandung, within the Bandung Institute of Technology, and the other one is on the Art Academy based in Yogyakarta, which is in Central Java. And then, in relations with collecting Indonesian modern art, I think it's somehow already very early introduced by our own very first president, Sukarno. His collections now, which is not really well managed by the presidential palace, still very much can be considered one of the best collections of Indonesian modern art. So I would say that historically, this guy, this president, this first president, somehow introduced the idea about the value of collecting Indonesian art, which then picked up by the next generation of Indonesians, wealthy people, elite, or whatever, and goes on. With the lack of formal infrastructure supported by the government, it's actually the private initiative then flourished, including, of course, commercial galleries, artist-run initiatives still there, still very much active. For instance, this book made possible also by the participations of artist-run initiative who provide us with research materials, photography, text, whatever, archive. It's called Indonesian Visual Archive, based in Yogyakarta, Central Java as well. So there are some others as well. Is there any other question? Yes, Pak. You supposedly not to ask us questions.
Very much amazed by the fast-moving activity of Arndt to bring the Indonesian artists on the world platform, especially in the market, and also at the same time very grateful. But I have a question. What brought your interest when you started, when you still didn't know anything about Southeast Asian art? Your interest to Indonesian art, because at the time I know that when the contemporary boom was there, Chinese artworks became too expensive. Indian and Southeast Asia is definitely a very good alternative. But why Indonesia? It's because Indonesia is the biggest country in Southeast Asia.
Is that because we are the available Chinese?
That's a good one. Yeah.
But yeah, in Indonesia, I think you agree with me that collectors play a very strong role. But on the other hand, the galleries is less strong than the collectors. So maybe if you start with another country in Southeast Asia, maybe the resistance or the competition of the collectors is less. But might it be you're thinking of, the Indonesian galleries, they are no match for me, like that? So I would like to have your arguments on this.
Well, I try to make that a short one. Unfortunately, and if you study my program a bit also back, which you don't have to, but let's say taking somebody like Thomas Hirschhorn that we showed for 18 years or 16 years, unfortunately, I never looked really at the commercial side at the beginning, because I look at this, what does actually really touch me, what is interesting me, what do I think, very personal, is relevant art. And luckily, I was over the years, had some good instinct and feeling, and then I would build the market around. That is why I'm still kind of a primary dealer and not an art dealer who's only buying and selling. I love profoundly what the artists are doing. That is motivating me, and I have to justify my position in that. And as I'm not a collector and don't have the means for, I'm more a promoter. But why Indonesia? So I didn't make this analysis how big the country is, how fast growing, how fast the middle class also is growing, how many future customers I have there, which is all true. It's amazing. It's a great perspective now. But when I started, I was just really provoked, first shocked, then attracted, and then kind of totally into the art itself, in its all diversity, and that made me wanting to act for it. And then the whole process started to build it. And I thought about China in another way, because 15 years ago, very beginning of my career, 20 years now, but 15 years ago, I got introduced to all these masters today, and I just, not that I didn't get it, but I felt so intimidated by the culture, said, you will never understand this, Matthias, you will never get profound knowledge about this, you can't promote them. And that was a big mistake, because if I wait until I totally understand everything, then I would never do anything, because it takes too long. Yeah? So, and I'm an impatient person, as you know me now a bit. So this time I said, don't do this mistake again. Even though you do not speak Bahasa yet, even though you didn't travel enough to Indonesia, follow your instinct, choose one or two artists, work from there, meet the others, and start promoting it and learn. It's really a bit embarrassing to say this to public. Learning by doing, get further knowledge, and therefore I can also help the people, the international audience that has this distant look and that is a bit hesitant still because they have the same problem. Like they said, we don't get into it, but while they are trying to get into it, they're already approaching it, and it's a process. So that it started like that, but it is true. Luckily I was early enough there to build my brand also, and I will work further. I mean, I'm now in touch with Southeast Asia. It will continue. I want to go to Vietnam. I want to go to Cambodia. We show Filipino artists, and my family moves now to Singapore to be in the heart of that area. So I guess that was.
Thank you,
one
Matthias.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, we are running out of time. There are some more interesting talk sessions upcoming. Thank you guys for joining us today. Thank you, Matthias, Entang, and Arin. Later on, if you would like to see the book, I think Arndt Galleries on the third level, they have several copies that you can. I don't know whether people can buy the book.
Ideally,
okay.
yeah, you would order them.
And
you would order them
then you
online.
can
also
see
with
the works of Entang also at Arndt's gallery. Other galleries representing Entang, also Kana Gallery from Jakarta, first level. Arin's work in
with Nadi
first level Langgeng Gallery, and then Nadi Gallery third level of the fair. Thank you guys for.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.